and surreptitious, and the restrictions traditional Palestinian society imposed on our life. I walked in them for escape and rejuvenation. The land around Ramallah is varied, but without large open areas. It is part of the central highlands that dominate most of the center of the West Bank. The valleys closer to town are narrow. The hills are steep, sometimes precipitous. There are no mountains anywhere in sight, only hills. The further west you walk, the lower and rounder the hills become as the land descends gently down to the coastal plain. All you can see are hills and more hills, like being in a choppy sea with high waves, the unbroken swells only becoming evident as the land descends westward. This landscape, we are told, was formed by the tremendous pressure exerted by tectonic forces pushing towards the east. It is as though the land has been scooped in a mighty hand and scrunched, the pressure eventually resulting in the great fault that created Jordan's Rift Valley, through which runs the River Jordan. The land seems never to have relaxed into plains and glens with easy flowing rivers, but has been constantly twisted and pressured to the point of cracking. Its surface is not unlike that of a gigantic walnut. Then I described the beginning of the walk. It was on a spring day in 1978, the year of my return to Ramallah, that I stumbled quite by accident upon the legendary Harrasha of Awanin deep in the hills of Palestine. It had been a long winter continuing to rain throughout April and during the first few days of May, which is most unusual for this part of the world.
Okay, I'm good.
I set out on my sarha just days after the rain had stopped. The sun had emerged and the earth was not too muddy. The sky was blue with low scattered clouds that sometimes blocked the sun, making it very pleasant to walk. My starting point on that day was behind the Anglican school in the northwestern neighborhood of Ramallah. I walked down the newly paved road, which continued northward towards the unfinished housing project, at that time the farthest excursion of the town into the hills. This is the Tire area, which is now totally built. I found the path almost immediately. Once on it, a certain peace and tranquility descended upon me. Now I could go on with no need to worry, just walk and enjoy the beauty of the nature around me. I ambled alongside the western side of the valley across the hill referred to as El Batta, the duck, so called because of the way it sits on the valley. Along the path, the wildflowers were in abundance. Most were in miniature. Blue iris, only a few centimeters high, pink flax, also very close to the ground, and the slightly taller Maltese cross and pyramid orchids, a colorful but thin carpet covering the vibrant land. I had assumed a pace that was neither hurried nor dawdling. I was heading towards the appropriately named Wadi Wardi, the flower, across the shoulder of the hill, a gentle descent that took me over one fold, down a small incline, and up another in a diagonal trajectory toward the valley. I could see that the wadi had longer grass and plants because it was fed by the sweet water of Ain al-Lawzi, the almond. I crossed over and listened to the faint sound of the dripping of the water down to a pool. Then I bent and looked into the hollow of the rocks from which the water oozed. I stretched out my hand and let the cold water run over it. There were plenty of stones and weeds. The spring was in bad need of cleaning, otherwise the water would be gushing out. I sat nearby, smelling the moist soil and looking at the impressive mossy brown cliff across the wadi. It was studded with cyclamen that grew out of every nook and cranny. They always seemed to grow in rocks that shielded them from the glare of the midday sun, squeezing themselves between cracks to protect their bulbs from drying up. And despite their precarious position, their delicate flowers grew straight up and were hooked at the top like a shepherd's staff. Their large variegated leaves, similar to those of the grapevines, but thicker and wider green, seemed suspended from nowhere, miraculously hanging on the high, steep rock. Above the cliff, the hill was steep, and from the vantage point seemed high and formidable.